This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 186 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're handling one of my favourite topics of all, travel mishaps, when things go wrong. Things going wrong tend to make the best stories. It's no coincidence that we've had several episodes on these kind of topics already, and people always love them because they're fun. And, you know, things go wrong, but as long as you survive, it's all okay. As far as I go, I have had definitely my fair share of travel mishaps. I know I've shared quite a lot of them with you before. The one that springs to mind is the time I rented a car and got trapped inside the course of the Copenhagen Marathon, for example. Not to mention the most embarrassing part of that was having to rely on my 9-year-old to figure out how to put our newly picked up rental car in reverse, something he will never, ever, ever, ever let me forget. What else? Well, actually, a lot using public transport. I love to use public transport. It is definitely, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best ways to experience a place properly. But using public transport in places where I don't speak the language has led me on many mystery tours over the years. I was just thinking of one recently. I ended up who knows where, somewhere on the outskirts of Vladivostok in far eastern Russia, because presumably I was on the wrong bus. And it was, when was it, 2003. Vladivostok was it seemed a slightly dark and dingy place at the time. And I have to say, I was a little bit worried when I had to get off this bus, which ended kind of in the middle of Nowhereville, Vladivostok. But fortunately, another one came along going the back where I'd come from fairly quickly. And obviously I survived. But I got to see a part of town that I wouldn't otherwise. So, as it is. If you get into these scrapes, you have a travel mishap, but it all turns out okay in the end, and then we have some unique stories to tell, like today's guests do. So today we have mishap tales of planes and bikes and haircuts, and I'm hoping that this episode of Travel Mishaps will help entertain you somewhat lightly during these days when we can't travel. So our first guest today is Catherine Marshall, a travel writer based in Australia who travels a lot. And because I suppose the odds are stacked against you when you travel a lot, at some stage there is going to be a plane mishap. And this is it.
A number of years ago, I was on my way to from Sydney to Myanmar, to Yangon. And I had a stopover in Kuala Lumpur. And it was quite a long stopover. It was about 5 hours. And I had a pass to get into the lounge for the particular airline that I was flying with, which shall remain unnamed for reasons that will become apparent.
Ooh, I'm intrigued.
Anyway, I am one of those people who likes to be very early for flights. I'd rather be at the airport 10 hours early rather than 3 minutes too late.
I am the same.
And I get very panic stricken, even if I know that I'm still early and on time and the flight couldn't possibly have left yet. I still panic. So I was in the lounge, I was busy working, and I'd been chatting to a woman, a Malaysian woman who was a member of the Department of Health, a minister, and she was on her way to Manila, and we chatted a bit. And anyway, I said to her, excuse me, I feel, that they should have called my flight. I need to just go and have a look. Went to the desk and they said, no, they haven't called it yet, but they'll be calling it in 15 minutes. And I went back and I thought, no, I'm going to just pack up now and go, because I think, they'll be calling it soon anyway. So I packed up and I said goodbye to the lady and have a good flight. And off I went. And as I approached my departure gate, I heard my name being called very urgently.
That's never
good. And I
good.
thought, well, no, that's never good. And so I rushed along, and I had to go through another set of security and came into if anyone's been to KL Airport, you'll know what I mean. Going another lounge behind glass. And I saw a stream of people disappearing into down the
like the boarding area. They were going to get on somewhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I quickly followed suit. When my ticket was duly scanned, and I was hurried through. And I thought, well, why were they calling my name? I mean, these people are still getting on. Anyway, I had a book with me. I was doing a story, a literary story on Burma. And so I had taken out of the library, one of the books that I was writing about was Burmese Days by George Orwell. He actually lived in Burma for 5 years. He was a part of the police force during the Raj.
I never knew that. Okay.
And that was his first novel, and it was based on his time as a policeman in Burma. So I had my book, and I got to my seat and sat down, and I popped my book into my pocket and a magazine, and popped my backpack in the overhead locker, and I thought, well, this is really, it was very unnecessary of them to call my name. There were still people boarding. And then I heard my name called again, and I thought, well, now what have I done? And there was a flight attendant at the front of the plane, and she was saying, Catherine Marshall, and she was waving, and I said, well, yes, here I am. And she said, come. So I thought, well, okay, and I squeezed past the people filing in, and she said, you're on the wrong flight.
Oh, no. How is this possible?
So I said, well, she said, come quickly. Your flight is leaving. You have to come quickly.
Oh, no.
So I said, well, my backpack is still up. I need my backpack. And another flight attendant got my backpack, and I think my jumper was on the seat, gave it to me, and I couldn't squeeze back down. The aisle was full of people, very grumpy people, because here I was causing a commotion. Raced off the plane. Somebody was marching along beside me, and there was a queue of people still boarding, and one of them was the woman I'd met in the lounge. Who was bound for Manila.
Oh, sorry. So you'd nearly gone to Manila.
And yes, and I saw her, and she gave me a very perplexed look.
I bet. Oh, no.
I had told her, of course, that I was going to Yangon. Anyway, and so this chap marched me back through the departure area, and there was another gate on the opposite side, and that was the gate I should have taken.
Right.
But of course, I had been scanned through. Let's not forget.
Yes, exactly. It hadn't said no, not on this flight.
Yes. Oh, there were no warning signals.
That's terrible.
So I was marched to the other plane. There was a flight attendant waiting for me with his hand on the door.
Oh.
I walked in, and he slammed the door behind me.
You poor thing. Oh, God.
I did the walk of shame down to my seat, which was the only empty seat on the plane.
Oh, no.
15A, I'll never forget, and everybody was looking at me. And I sat down, and I slunk into my seat, and I suddenly realized I've left my library book in the pocket.
Oh, no. Oh, dear.
And there is nothing that I can do about it. So
your library book is on the way to Manila.
My library book had a trip to Manila, and I often wonder where it is today.
Yes, did someone else read it?
I wonder, yes.
Oh, no.
And they might have wondered, what on earth is this book doing in this pocket? In fact, perhaps the woman who had I chatted to in the lounge. Maybe she sat in 15A.
Yes, hopefully, because she might understand why it was there.
Yeah, she might have put two and two together.
Oh, no. Oh,
Yeah.
That's terrible. Did you ever? So were they calling your name because their flight was late?
Yes, that flight was fully boarded, and I was the only.
But yet the lounge people had said to you that it wasn't yet. So
yes, and that still remains a bit of a mystery. So to this day, the lesson it has taught me is I never trust anyone.
Yeah.
If the lounge person has said no, please go ahead, relax.
No.
If my instinct is telling me to go, I go.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it really is terrible that they that it scanned you through and didn't.
Yes, which is why I haven't named the airline.
Yes, fair enough. Fair enough indeed.
They're a very good airline otherwise. I've got no other complaints.
Yes, and you're not a terrorist, so it worked out okay.
No.
So just a library book thief.
Now, there's a lovely epilogue to this story that Catherine told me afterwards. So she needed, of course, this book for her trip. It wasn't just a book that she was reading to pass the time. She needed it for the story she was writing. So while she was in Yangon, she managed to find another copy and buy it. And by chance, it was exactly the same edition. So when she got back to Sydney, she went to the library and said, "I'm sorry, I lost your book. It's not my fault, but here is a replacement." And fortunately, because it was exactly the same edition with the same ISBN, they allowed her to replace it that way. So there you go. Somewhere out there, perhaps in Manila, perhaps beyond, is the original library book. So I really did enjoy that story. Now, my next guest today is Kiki Wong, and she had a kind of travel mishap, or almost a trip mishap, I suppose, going on a media trip where she didn't quite know what to expect.
I actually like to try things that are a little bit test your ability, that test you a little bit, that make you slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I generally would like to think of myself as a pretty strong person and capable of withstanding any issues that come towards my way. And I work out a lot. But I actually took a media trip to go to the Grand Canyon on a biking excursion, and it was through this place called Escape Adventures. They're incredible people, amazing tour group. And what happens is you ride mountain bikes out in the Grand Canyon. So I thought, hey, I used to ride mountain bikes when I was in high school 20 years ago. So it's probably okay. But I was like, sure, why not? Let's do it. And I'm in okay shape. I work out. Let's do it. So I go
beautiful place to do
out
it.
there. Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous. And it was funny, the day before, they actually sent us an email saying, oh, by the way, there's no electricity and there's also no phone service.
Oh.
And we were supposed to go on a media trip with, I think, about 12 people. And the next day we found out about 7 of them canceled.
No
the
way.
day before, because it was a bunch of Instagram influencers, so it wasn't particularly the type that would enjoy,
the lack of electricity and Wi-Fi.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, well, I'm here, so let's do this. And we get there, and the group is it was me, one other influencer that decided to stay on, and then 3 professional professional mountain bikers.
Oh no!
And I was like, oh dear.
Oh, this sounds really bad.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, let's give this a go. I haven't been on a bike since high school, so I was like, well, it's like riding a bike, right?
Exactly, easy.
Yeah. Well, we get up into the mountains, and I should have done my research. I didn't realize that the place that we would be mountain biking was at around 8,000 feet elevation.
Oh.
So yeah, it's about twice as much as Colorado. So it's pretty tall. And we're like, yeah, I'll be fine. I was in, Peru. I'll be okay. So we start riding, and I get up the first hill and I threw up everywhere.
Oh no, you poor thing. Oh,
I was like this. I physically exerted myself so bad. Meanwhile, a thunderstorm was coming in, and it started hailing on all of us.
Oh no!
And, I was like, "This is so crazy!" And we ended up having to go 5 miles in, and there's no turning around because the van had dropped us off, and it was going to meet us at the end of the trail.
No!
And the professional bikers had already made it 45 minutes ahead, and we ended up getting flooded. so bad that the water was up to our lower knees, like right below our knees.
No way.
And so it was the crazy, it was the craziest thing. And like, it was so bad that like, we just laughed. Like it was like, this is so crazy. Like, I don't even know what to say. And this is day one. We were supposed to be out there for 5 days.
Oh, no. I mean, you have to laugh because otherwise you'll cry in a situation like that.
Oh, exactly. 100%. And the funny part about it was about 3 hours it took us to get through it all. And then at the end, when we got to the end of the trail, there was this beautiful rainbow over the insane flooding that had happened. So it was like a river that we had swam through essentially, and then a rainbow over it. But I think that like in those times, travel experiences, like especially for those that are spending a lot of money purchasing travel experiences, and sometimes they can go awry.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I think it's important to be able to laugh it off and understand that the experience is something, and remove yourself from having any like negative emotions towards it, and look at your experience with an objective perspective and see like, this is the world. Like, this isn't my opinion in the situation. This is an experience that I'm living through almost. So I think at first I was a little frustrated, but later on I started getting acquainted. It was exhausting, and it took me 2 days to acclimate to the elevation.
Oh gosh.
But it was bad. It was pretty bad. But towards the end, I looked back and I thought, what an incredible life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm.
I will never judge a negative experience ever again, because it can so quickly turn into something so positive and so amazing. Because I think on the 4th or 5th day, I had the best ride of my life. It almost made me want to buy a mountain bike and ride around here. I was like, I was like getting teary eyed because it was so beautiful. And I could have been a little delirious, but
yeah, potentially.
but yeah, it was definitely life changing for me, because never judge a negative experience. It can always turn into something good.
Yeah, that is such a good life lesson, isn't it? I mean, I often find, and I often have people tell me the tales of when things went wrong on their travels, and even when things just stay going wrong, by the end, as long as you survive, then after that, it's just something that it makes a good story, and you either, you laugh about it, or you learn something else from it, and it's actually okay. When you're going through it, you don't always feel that, but I think it's so important to remember that.
So there you go. A travel mishap can turn into a fabulous travel memory if you just keep going. I think that's a good lesson from Kiki. Now, my final guest today is Rick Antonson. And you might remember not too long ago in episode 177 on African travels, Rick decided to go to Mali just because of his father's oft-repeated phrase that he was going to Timbuktu for a haircut. So when Rick and I were chatting, I asked him about his experiences in Timbuktu, and I did say, did he end up getting a haircut there? And the story is that yes, he did, but, well, I mean, it's in an episode about travel mishaps, so you might want to know exactly what happened with this haircut.
The cost was about equivalent to a $1 Australian.
Right.
And it was at night. I was coming back from having been sort of in town on my own. I did not have the guide with me, and I was walking in the dark toward the desert where my accommodation was, and it was getting fewer and fewer abodes. And I came across this shack that had a Timbuktuan, if that can be a term, a Malian young fellow, maybe in his early 30s, who was giving a haircut to another local. And I looked in, and there was only a single light bulb there, and the one fellow was sitting in the chair, and they looked at me, and we could communicate a bit of basic French, and they had a bit of English, and I said, I'd like a haircut. And the one fellow stood up and got out of the chair, and I tried to motion that I would wait, but no, I was the novelty. And they had me sit down, and he proceeded to cut. Now, I've had haircuts all over the world. I would say this as an aside. Barbershops are like a theater, and they are the same yesterday as they are tomorrow. The only thing is that you, as a foreigner, walk in off stage. The music they are playing is their music. The conversation they're having with other locals is their conversation. This is them, their setting. The only difference is you are there. So I'm kind of quiet. I try to listen. I'll talk if I can ask questions. If not, I let them cut my hair the way they cut it. And they gave me a local haircut.
That sounds very brave.
Except when I looked in the mirror, I'd been shaven to near bald.
Oh, no.
And that's what they'd done with the other fellow. First of all, half the head, and then the second half is a little bit longer, and that was my haircut.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Haircut in Timbuktu. And I loved it for the unusualness. This was, for me, an unparalleled moment. I thought at the time, no one else can ever have this. Now, this I was there in 2004. The book came out much later, but at the time, telecommunications were quite difficult, and there was only one place there I could get on a phone. And I paid for this, and I waited through the international operators, and I got my mother and father's recording message, and I left a message, Dad, I'm in Timbuktu. I just got my hair cut.
I bet they loved that.
Yeah, it was pretty special.
So if you want a really, really short, nearly bald haircut, Timbuktu seems to be your place. Otherwise, maybe hold off until you get back from your travels. But I'm still really glad that Rick went to the effort to actually get this haircut in Timbuktu. Very cool story. All right. So that is the end of our travel mishaps for today. I would love to hear about your travel mishaps. Head over to the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group and please indulge me with one of your mishaps because that'll make me giggle, and that's what we need to do more of these days while we are in pandemic lockdown and unable to get out and see the world at the moment. So thank you very much for listening to episode 186 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. A very big thank you to my guests, especially for sharing the tales of when things go wrong. They're not always our finest moments, but they are often the funniest, and, we still get some lessons out of them too, which is even better. So first up today, I chatted with the delightful Catherine Marshall. She has a website coming imminently at catherinemarshall.com.au, and you can read more from Catherine and her friends at Time to Wander, which is at timetowander.com.au. Thanks also to Kiki Wong from her Nylon Pink site, and you can read Kiki's adventures at nylonpink.tv. And also thanks to Rick Antonson. You can find more about him at rickantonson.com, and you can read much more about his trip to Timbuktu and Mali in his book To Timbuktu for a Haircut, and I'll leave a link in the show notes so you can find that. If you, like me, love hearing about travel mishaps and when things go wrong, I've got a couple of other episodes for you. So you can go back in the archives and look for episode 73, When Things Go Wrong, and more recently, episode 158, When Travel Days Go Wrong. So there's more tales of travel mishaps and fun in those two episodes. I'll leave those links in the show notes as well. So these show notes for this episode, they will be at notaballerina.com/186 for episode 186. As always, thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.